My name is Dr. Lori Linkins. I am a thrombosis consultant at the Juravinski Hospital in Hamilton and with the McMaster University. And I met Clive Kearon over 20 years ago when I was an internal medicine resident, and he was my mentor and my personal friend. Clive Kearon had a passion for research, and most of his peers are going to remember him for the studies that he did that were landmark trials in the area of thrombosis. They're going to remember his duration of anticoagulation studies, the role of thrombophilia, diagnosis of PE and DVT. But more importantly for me and for many others like me, he had a passion for teaching research. And he spent a number of years being the director of the clinician investigator program at McMaster, but he was also a mentor individually to me from the beginning of when I did hematology residency up until just very recently, actually. And he was generous with his time. And I think that's the one thing that I heard from everybody that I asked when I tried to get some impressions for this particular talk. And he was ruthless with his red pen, and we all learned to hate it. But somehow he managed to make your paper better, and he offered you advice that was honest and frank. And he was generous with his time in other ways as well. My office was next door to his for many years, and I remember countless number of times that I knocked on his door and said, "Look, I've got this really tough clinical case. Do you mind if I bounce it off of you?" And not once in over 20 years of knowing him did he ever brush me off or say he was too busy. He always stopped whatever he was doing and said, "Sure, come on in and let's talk about it." And he would always have some advice to offer. I didn't always follow it, but it was important to at least be able to talk about it out loud. And many, many, many times I did follow it because it was good advice. And the two most important things he taught me really actually weren't research related at all. One was that family comes first. And in particular, as he began to get sick, he really understood the importance of that. But even before he became ill, when I used to tell him that there were certain family events that would have to take precedent over certain work-related events, he never gave me a hard time about it. In fact, he encouraged me to do that because he said that that was always the most important part of his life. And the other thing he taught me was that even though you may do everything right for a patient and make all of the right decisions, sometimes things happen that are bad. And that somehow you've got to find a way to learn from it and to move on to help the next patient. So Clive was a brilliant researcher. He was a caring physician, but he was also very kind and humble, and he had a really warm sense of humor. And he was just the kind of person that you enjoyed spending time with. And for me personally, he moved out of the realm of being my mentor into being a very close friend. In fact, towards the end of his days, I held a rounds at our hospital that he wasn't particularly interested in the topic, and they were early in the morning, and he had already told me long before then that mornings were becoming too difficult for him because he was ill, and it was hard for him to get in early in the morning, and he came anyway. And that's just the way he was. He was there because he wanted to support me. And so that's just a good example of the kind of person he was, more than just the researcher that most of the rest of the world would know. And he's dearly missed.